Let's get going here. The theme of our second panel is Water Tomorrow. What is the plan? And by tomorrow, we mean a little ways out into the future. We're going to learn more about the complex issues and decisions that await us in developing long-term water supply, reliability, and sustainability. California's water leaders, elected officials, and public faced the water bond challenge back in 2014. It was approved overwhelmingly, which is pretty amazing when voters vote to tax themselves and spend money, but we did it because the people of California realized the significance. And with that money, the bond is spawning significant investments and action. But of course, we face new issues. We need to build new consensus and public support to ensure we have the infrastructure, policies, and programs needed for a sustainable water supply for the next century. All right, same format as the previous panel. We're going to go through them one at a time, and then we're going to do questions at the end. We're going to begin with Brandon Goshi, Manager of Water Policy and Strategy for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, as we lovingly refer to it as the 800-pound gorilla of water policy in Southern California. Brandon is a long-term strategy and defining approaches to maintain reliable water supplies for Southern California in the face of the growing uncertainty. He leads a team responsible for the planning and analysis of water supply, demand, and storage programs, policies, and strategies. And I'm going to have to take a breath to finish this sentence. For Metropolitan's 5,200 square mile service area, and of course, there are 19 million people in this area the Metropolitan serves. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Goshi.
Hi, good morning. So I'm going to take a couple minutes here and talk a little bit about what's the plan for the future. I mean, I think we all have, because of this devastating drought, we all have feelings of unreliability and uncertainty in terms of, is there a way to remain reliable in terms of water supply in the future? So Southern California's pursuit of reliability. Southern California is fortunate, I believe, well, me personally, because I work there, but is fortunate to have a metropolitan water district. And when the state of California created the Metropolitan Water District Act and enabled a group of, or an area to band together to supplement their water supplies, it was a good thing for Southern California because it allowed a way to look regionally to see how we can solve problems that are felt locally, but at a regional level. So the Metropolitan Water District is here to provide its service area, that 5,200 square miles of service area of adequate, reliable supplies of high quality water, and try to do it in an environmentally and economically responsible way. And I think, I'll show you that I think we've tried to live that as time has gone through the long term. Metropolitan Water District as a wholesaler, we're a regional water wholesaler, not a retailer, so we never actually, we don't have contact with the end users, right? We have 26 member agencies that serve the 19 million people in Southern California, and we're governed by a 38-member board of directors. So those 26 member agencies, some are retailers, some are wholesalers. I think in total there's about 180, 185 retailer purveyors within the Metropolitan Water District service area. So again, we cover 6 counties, and the total water use, it's a lot less today because of the dramatic conservation and water use reductions that we're seeing, but roughly 4 million acre feet a year of total water demand in the service area. So in terms of long-term planning, the region back in the early 1990s following that devastating drought of the late 80s and 90s started looking more regionally to see how can the region remain reliable and could that be affordable? So in 1996, that was the culmination of what was, I think, 4 or 5 years of work by local agencies, by local governments, by representatives to determine what would be the best path of investment to invest. And I think back to the 1990s, I started at Metropolitan in 1994, and actually Shane was there, and I think we were just basically just out of college, right? Thinking about looking at these plans, and the idea was, let's plan for 2020 and what will that look like? And it seems like, that's so far away, 2020. It's only 3 years around the corner now. I feel like a lot of the things that we talked about, though, have come to fruition through an IRP, and that IRP, again, set targets for development in major resource categories like local resources, recycled water, groundwater recovery, right? Set targets for building storage in Southern California. Set targets for trying to stabilize our imported supplies. This plan was updated in 2004 to try to update for current conditions. In 2004, the big things that were happening was a quantification of the Colorado River, right, and a reduction of California's water use on the Colorado River. We started to learn a little bit more about planning for uncertainty and the need for identifying additional projects that could be built, a planning buffer, if you would, in case things went wrong with our basic plans. In 2010, our board took us in the direction of introducing an adaptive management approach through our 2010 IRP update. So while we still sought to stabilize imported supplies and meet growth in the region through local development and water use efficiency, the 2010 IRP introduced this adaptive management approach that allowed us to try and see what resources were available in the region that weren't currently developable. And at the time, we had a program called the Foundational Actions Program. That Foundational Actions Program really helped us identify some things like stormwater, other resources that needed to have some investment made, not on implementation, but on research and development to make sure those things are available for implementation in case they're needed. I talked about over the 20 years what has been done. This pie chart basically shows some of the accomplishments that have been done in water resources portfolio development. On the left, when we used to look forward in the 1990s, we saw that more than half of the development that we would do meant that imported supplies would be relied upon for over 50% of the water use in Southern California. Over 50%, right? You see the blue wedge of conservation and recycling and the orange wedge of local supply. That's what would have happened if it was kind of status quo development of those local supplies. What the IRP did was shift the focus to building diversification. So now you can see that now closer to half in an average year would be brought by, 1/3 of the water supply would be brought by the Colorado River and the State Water Project, those imported supplies. And there's been heavy, heavy investment on the regional level in local projects to build local supplies, to build conservation and water recycling. So that has been a very real activity that took place as a result of the IRP, and a shift, again, of the regional focus and resources of Metropolitan through its agencies to make those investments work in the future. So the question is, where does that leave us today, and can we be reliable in the future? In the IRP, the 2015 update, we asked the question, given the development that's taken place till today, if we did nothing else, if we made no new investments, what would happen to our region as we looked out to 2040? Now, hopefully I won't be here working in 2040. I'll be almost out of here. But it's interesting to see 2020, 2 years from now, if you look at these bars, these are our supplies in wet years, average years, and dry years. And you can see that it ranges. In dry years, we have supplies of about 1.7 million acre feet to over 2.4 million acre feet. And this is metropolitan supplies. This is the demands for water supplies. And you can see that in average and dry years, you start to see, well, actually in dry years, you see a gap between the demands that exist in dry years and the supplies that are available. But one key point is that in wet years and in average years, we have supplies that are equal to or higher than the demands, which means the storage that we've invested in over the last 20 years, over 5.5 million acre feet of storage, can be used to store that water, and that includes groundwater storage as well. So again, in 2020, on average, we're in balance. But wet years, water is used then to meet what would be dry year conditions, okay? When we switch to 2040, way out in the future, and look at what supplies we have today, you can see that something starts to happen here. The amount of surplus in wet years is much less. Now we have a shortage of supplies in average years, which means we'd be using storage reserves or relying on those storage reserves in average years. And in dry years, the gap between supplies and demands are much deeper. So this clearly tells the story that something needs to be done if Southern California is to continue. Investments needs to be made if Southern California is to continue to be reliable as we are today. So without further action, the balance between supplies and demand is unsustainable. We can see that in the move from 2020 to 2040. The chance of having shortages and the size of those shortages increase over time. right? Water in storage, even though we have a substantial water storage portfolio, would be tapped out without new investment. And so we do need significant resource investments. So this is exacerbated by additional risks that, kind of we have to consider in our planning: climate change, water quality risk to existing resources, implementation risks of new things that we've identified. The more difficult it is to put in a new project, the more risk there is. So given these risks, how do we ensure reliability? The 2015 IRP sets out a plan to do that. 4 areas of investment that were identified: conservation, right? The region has done such a great job in conservation and has really saturated the indoor water use of conservation. The focus now is on the outdoors. How do we achieve efficiency in the outdoors? And I'm not saying get rid of all the outdoor irrigation. I'm saying, how do we achieve efficiency in the outdoors? That's going to be a big component of sustainable water use in the future. Local resources development. How do we ensure that those local resources we have continue to produce water? And how do we take advantage of those new opportunities that we heard of in the last panel? On the Colorado River Aqueduct, we need to stabilize the supplies that we have there. That's a major source of water with interstate rights that need to be, those supplies need to be maintained. And then last but not least, the State Water Project. We're one of the 29 contractors on the State Water Project. Steve's going to talk more about the California Water Fix, but the amount of water supply and the variability in that water supply, in other words, the ability to get more wet year water, is really key in helping our whole overall portfolio work. And so investments, smart investments in those 4 areas were identified in the IRP as a way we can maintain reliability in the future. So in conclusion, together through the IRP, the region has worked towards identifying a long-term plan. The last 20 years has evidence that we can do that. We can accomplish those things. We need to see how to continue to accomplish those things in the future. So the IRP has set those targets. We can work together to meet those targets. And with that, it's a plan for reliability and a chance for Southern California to remain reliable in the future. With that, I'll move to the next panelist.
Brandon, thank you so much. All right, our next speaker is also from the Metropolitan Water District, Stephen Arakawa. And as Brandon alluded, one of the main legs that holds up our water supply in Southern California is the State Water Project that brings water down from the Sierra Snowmelt through that elaborate network of reservoirs. Stephen has over 30 years of experience as a civil engineer. Metropolitan, he's responsible for plans and activities to secure a reliable supply for the State Water Project. And of course, the Bay Delta plan, the Fix-It plan, he's going to talk about that today. Oh my goodness, Stephen, you've been around a long time. Before 1987, you were with State Water Resources. Academically, he's got a degree from LMU with civil engineering. So Stephen, come join us and tell us about the Fix-It plan.
Thank you, Patrick. I was hoping that somebody would help me to the podium. Well, I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you about what I think is probably the most interesting political water issue in California. It's also the most frustrating because I've worked on it quite a while during my career, and it's how to deal with the Delta, how to deal with the system that uses a channel system in the middle of California, just east of San Francisco Bay, to move water from the reservoir system to the aqueducts that move water down the San Joaquin Valley. And I would say that the politics seem statewide, but in reality, all politics are local. And that's a part of what I want to talk to you today about, because in the end, decisions on whether to move forward start at the local level. They're going to start at the local level up north, and they're going to start at the local level down south. And so I want to provide to you some thinking as to why this project fits in with what you're trying to do locally with your groundwater management and your recycled water. The terms California Water Fix and Eco Restore are the state's descriptions on how they're moving forward to fix the issues in the Delta. And Cal Water Fix is really the conveyance or water delivery system in the Delta to help to allow water delivery that does not impact fish as much, to try to fix that problem that's been plaguing the State Water Project for many, many years. The Eco Restore is to reverse and reestablish some of the important habitat in the delta that has been removed over many years, 100, 150 years because of development. So putting both of those things together is what the state's pursuing. And some key decisions are coming up this year. The state project supply is important to the region, Southern California, but it's important to San Gabriel as well. And I'm going to go into the need for getting wet year water, replenishing groundwater basins, and the quality of the state project water to help with recycled water. And because this has plagued us for many years, because it's been so elusive, and because the state has now worked on this particular proposal for many years, closing in on 10, now's the time to make a decision. I don't need to go through who Metropolitan is. Brandon did a great job of doing that. But I did want to focus a little bit on the fact that 30% of the region's water comes from the State Water Project, some more than others. Some areas rely more on groundwater basins, but then they replenish those groundwater basins with imported water. Other areas are more dependent on water, and with anything in the state, we're all interlinked. We're interlinked in our economies. People work in one area, they live in another. So to a degree, reliability in Southern California affects us all. And I think that the other thing I wanted to talk about maybe visually, and I'm not Vin Scully, so I wouldn't do that justice in describing this delta area. I'm trying to visualize the idea of two rivers, the Sacramento River coming from the north end of the state towards the San Francisco Bay, the San Joaquin River flowing from the south in the southern portion of the San Joaquin Valley flowing up north towards the Sacramento, and then those two rivers joining. That's what is called the delta. It's called the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And imagine many years ago, it was a natural system. It had natural berms, natural banks to the rivers. The delta area where those two rivers joined was a tidal marshland, and much of it about sea level elevation, but the waters came in and out, very rich in terms of organic material, evolved over many years, and a lot of species of fish and terrestrial, et cetera. And over time, that system evolved from the gold rush on, where areas were drained for agriculture. They were diked, so it dried out. People started to farm. A lot of people from the Midwest that came from the gold rush era. And agriculture really settled in the early 1900s. They built man-made levees or dikes. So much bigger dikes channelized the system. The whole Sacramento River became a flood control system. So rather than just a natural river, it became more of a channelized river with flood control. Area developed for population. Some urbanization occurred, particularly the Sacramento area, moving down towards the delta, the town of Stockton with its urbanization, and then the water projects, the federal water project in the 1940s and the state water project in the 1960s and 70s. All of those things affected the delta system. And so we now have a system that's highly managed. Think of the land area in the delta, these agricultural areas being 15, 20, 25 feet below sea level because of the continued agriculture, because of the oxidation of these organic peat soils. But our water goes through these channels down south towards the export pumps. And so these earthen levees are what provides the reliability of our water and is an earthquake away or a major catastrophe away from basically interrupting that water supply. So the state, when they built the project, they decided we're going to put off how to deal with the movement of water from north to south through this delta system. In reality, we're reversing the flows, we're causing unnatural flow patterns, bringing Sacramento River down to the south end of the delta. water basically causing a dead end for fish. They knew that from the beginning in 1960, but they put that decision off because they felt that the state had a lot of debt at the time, building the state water project, building the university and highway system, so they put that decision off. But since that time, solutions have been elusive. 1982 was mentioned earlier about the Peripheral Canal. Again, statewide vote means local politics, where Southern California is versus Northern California. And where we are today is probably the most advanced stage towards solving this issue than we've ever been, because a full environmental impact report has been put together. It's gone through a couple of iterations of public drafts, the most extensive analysis, public drafts in 2013, and another release of that public draft in 2015 to get further comments on it. And so with California Water Fix, that's the way to solve the delivery system, to maybe create more natural flow patterns in the delta. It would be a tunnel system, 150 feet below sea level, 2 side-by-side tunnels, about 40 feet in diameter. And the reason for the tunnel is because it would allow for water to be diverted farther up in the Sacramento River, and that water not having to go through those delta channels, because it's that flow reversal in the delta is a problem for fish. So being able, during fish-sensitive times, to divert that water in that spot would be good for fish. But it's also reliability for people, because it's an engineered solution to withstand major earthquakes, and that's important to all of us in Southern California, but also the state in general relies on the State Water Project, because the Bay Area uses water from the state project. The Central Coast, Santa Barbara, uses water from the state project, and of course the large agricultural economy of California uses that water as well. The cost of that would be paid by water contractors that are part of the State Water Project and also the Federal Water Project. Metropolitan is about 25% of the total volume of the water that is used and exported south of the Delta. So conceivably our share of the cost of that would be about 25%. Now, California Eco Restore is the companion program to restore the habitat. And the governor's made it a primary priority to get that going in the 5 years, or in the next 5 years, and particularly the groundbreak on projects during his tenure remaining in office. Those would include some projects that are part of the existing state project mitigation responsibility, but also go beyond that to do more broader projects that would use broader public funds in order to reverse some of the damage that's occurred over time. So it's well down the planning process. We are getting to decision process. It's critical because it deals with the reliability of supply, and it deals with the environmental value of ecosystem of restoration. And it really is designed to deal with the fact that California's hydrology is very wet or very dry. A lot of the times it's not in the middle. And with climate change, it's likely getting more exaggerated. So capturing those large flows during wet years and wet events. Cost to our area, on average, about $5 per month per household. When you boil it all down, the cost of a $15.7 billion conveyance project with the mitigation, with Metropolitan's share, our region's share of it, about 25%. That equates to about $5 per month per household. Some areas are going to be less than that because of the fact that they have local water. So why does this matter to the state? It matters because it fixes some of the long plaguing problems that were built into the system from the beginning. It will provide for protecting the billions and billions of dollars that have been invested in the state water project system, in the systems that we've built to take that state project water, both pipelines and treatment plants, and also storage reservoirs. It would allow for the most optimum way of surviving risks, whether they be local risks or imported risks, because both supplies have those risks. and in doing so, may be the most balanced way to deal with rates. Our future is going to rely on more conservation and recycled water and other local supply to meet our needs. That's where our new water is going to come from. Any new demand is going to be dependent on that, but keeping and stabilizing and protecting the existing supply is going to be critical. For the San Gabriel Valley, groundwater basins so critical to this area, and having the ability to replenish those groundwater basins when there is supply after the levels have been drawn down. The cities that depend on those groundwater basins, their economies, their residents are dependent upon that supply, and so it's critical to just the community and to the areas that live in this area that rely on that groundwater basin. Surviving droughts. We would have had a much serious problem in the previous two droughts of 2008, 2009, and the one that we're currently in if we didn't have the ability to store water in wet years and retrieve it. And without an improved system in the Delta, that kind of reliability is going to erode out into the future. So we've got to fix that problem. Capturing big storms, putting that water into storage, and then the quality of the state project water allows for the recycled water because we have Colorado River water that's higher in salinity, being able to blend it, and that makes the feasibility for recycled water and for groundwater management. Key decisions, the ones imminent are on the verge are the environmental documents, the EIR, EIS coming to completion this year, and the Endangered Species Act permits, both the state and the federal. Farther out over time, new water rights diversion permits from the State Water Board and the Corps of Engineers permits, and that's out into 2017 and 2018. So as far as what to be focused on now, it's the approval of these environmental documents, the endangered species permits, and talking with your opinion leaders and your political elected officials as far as your interest in the State Water Project and its reliability. And the time is now. We've reached this after many, many years. The state needs to make a big decision, and the state is best equipped to make a big decision when it's hearing from the local constituencies. And with that, look forward to the questions that we get later. Thank you.
Stephen Arakawa, thank you so much for your overview of an enormous issue with so many ramifications and, quite frankly, so many controversial issues that have not yet been fully addressed. All right, for a little change of pace, we have an alumnus from the Metropolitan Water District for our next speaker. Shane Chapman, who is currently GM of the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. It's one of the 26 Met members, of course. For 19 years prior, he was at Met. Shane academically has a bachelor's from Claremont McKenna and a Master of Public Administration from the Price School of Public Policy at USC. So whatever you do, don't mention Stanford or Alabama. All right, let's welcome Shane.
Well, good morning. Lots of familiar, friendly faces. I appreciate everyone making the time for us today and your interest in water supply for the San Gabriel Valley. A bit about Upper District. You're all familiar with us. For those of you that are not, just as Patrick mentioned, one of the 26 agencies that makes up the Metropolitan Water District. The 5 gentlemen I work for are elected board of directors down there at the bottom. If we could, am I advancing this myself? Okay. Both Brandon and Steve talked a little bit about Metropolitan Water District. Very interesting agency with a lot of history, but the 26 member agencies that make it up function together as a family and most often function well, but like any family, occasionally there are issues. Somebody completely loses their mind and we have to talk them off the ledge. Upper District there is highlighted in LA County, called out a little bit, and we're very fortunate that we're up against the San Gabriel Mountains here, and we have partners like the LA County Flood Control District and Sanitation District, so we have opportunities to manage our groundwater basin. There we go. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time on this, and I want you to leave with this general rule of thumb. 80-20, 80% dependent on local hydrology. That's the yellow there in that pie chart. 20% dependent on the imported water system. So both very important to us. On the right, depicting the local hydrology, we have the flood control district's overflow structure, outlet structure for Morris Dam as you go up Highway 39 up into the San Gabriel Canyon. Earlier the question was asked, where does the water come from the basin? Well, this is a snapshot of it. I like this picture because not only does it illustrate the importance of the local infrastructure managed so well by the flood control district, but in the bottom right of that picture on the right, you see some white water down there. That's coming from that picture up in the far left. It's coming to us all the way from the Bay Delta that Steve just talked about. Water's hard, it's complicated, it's complex, it's political, it's technically challenging. And with these pictures, you start to get a sense of what we have to pay attention to here in the San Gabriel Valley. Local hydrology, the flood control district's future success and continued success, and the imported water system. And whatever we can do to reduce the pressure and on that imported water system here locally, as we've heard several success stories so far, and whatever we can do to help the flood control district help us better manage the risk of that local hydrology, which that's what we're really feeling today. That's where we have to stay focused. So if you're driving around in the San Gabriel Valley and you go by the 605 and the 210 interchange, the flood control district today is spreading about 500 to 600 acre feet a day of imported water from the State Water Project. So we're taking advantage, working with Metropolitan Water District, we're taking advantage of that average year, the Godzilla and Nino, that average year we had in Northern California to bring some of that water down and get it back in this groundwater basin. Just drove by it this morning. It was a very welcome sight. Not to leave out the complexity of the Colorado River, illustrated by that famous bathtub ring at Lake Mead on the lower right. We have to pay attention to that too, even though we don't physically receive that water today, and we rely on the water from the State Water Project. Our 25 other partners that make up the Metropolitan Water District depend on that water. So together we're all a family, and we have to hang together and work together to continue to move forward and be successful. To drive the point home, a lot of discussion this morning about hydrology. What we're looking at here is percent of normal. So 18, 19 inches of rain on the valley floor here is what we normally experience. And the Lanada was mentioned, 2004, 2005, to get you more oriented to this graph. Very wet year, about 45 inches of rainfall, 247% of normal. That's the high bar there over towards the left. Back where we are today, if we're below that black line, which is the 18, 19 inches of rainfall, well, that's where we really start to feel it in the groundwater basin level, where we're not getting the benefit of that natural recharge coming out of the mountains. And when we look at this and we add up what our recent experience has been over the last 5, 6 years, we're almost 4 feet behind. So we measure rainfall in terms of inches, right? Well, we're about 46, a little over 46 inches behind. Now, if we were to get all that in 1 year, we wouldn't be able, flood control district would not be able to capture all that just because of the sheer volume of water coming out of the canyon. They have to release it to protect life and property and default back to their primary mission, flood control operations, which is perfectly appropriate. That's what they do. So keep this in mind too, is when you're 80% dependent on what comes to you out of the local mountains, we really have to proactively manage the risk of this situation that we're in today. My staff let me out of the office with graphs and charts. I love graphs and charts. So Patty's over there, our Director of Community Affairs, rolling her eyes. So a lot of conversation about water conservation and its importance. I'm going to try and pick us up a little bit. We've been shared a lot of success stories, but a lot of challenges shared so far this morning. Something wrong with the formatting here, I apologize, but you get the gist of it. So in 06, 07, about 270,000 acre feet of water used in the San Gabriel Valley. So this is the whole basin. Today, as Steve Johnson mentioned, 185,000 acre feet. That's outstanding. That's incredible. So you see this continual, gradual downward trend in the water use. We need to keep a focus on that. We need to keep moving in that direction. It takes the pressure off the basin. It makes it more feasible that we'll be successful long term. You've seen these graphs of the basin level continuing to decline. We're kind of on a glide slope, fortunately. It's still going down, but it's not a precipitous vertical dead stick nosedive down. It's kind of coming in softly because of the conservation. So we're down 36% from 10 years ago. That's tremendous. We're up 100% with recycled water over the last 10 years, and this is the joint efforts of Upper District, Roland, Walnut, the Sanitation District, our partners like Rose Hills, and that's a pretty significant increase. It's not a tremendous amount of water, 10,000 acre feet a year, relative to what we need out of the local watershed, but every bit counts, and this illustrates that as the opportunities have arisen and the funding's been available, we have collectively taken advantage of that. I mentioned water's complicated. Why is that last bar in 2014-15, why did it go down? What were we doing? Well, we were all conserving water. And interestingly, most of this goes towards irrigation. So as the cities and our customers, parks, golf courses, medians, schools, all become more efficient with the water use, that's carrying over into the recycled water arena as well. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We need every drop that's available out there. So we're up 100% with recycled water in the San Gabriel Valley, and there's a little bit more to do. They really turned me loose with this graph. We've got 2 axes on this graph for you to read. So over on the left, on the bottom is time, and over on the left is the percent of precipitation that we received that was captured. So those are the orange bars, 0 to 100. 100 being really good, captured all of it. Anything less than 100, we're like, wow, there's an opportunity here. Maybe there's something we can do to capture some more. Over on the right-hand axis is the blue line, rainfall. So here's a shout out to our friends at the Flood Control District. We're very fortunate in that the forefathers, if you will, of San Gabriel Valley recognized the importance because of their agricultural citrus economy roots of capturing what naturally came to them from the San Gabriel Canyon. So the Flood Control District, if you look at all those bars that are well above 100%, on average captures 97% of everything that comes to us through the San Gabriel Canyon and here locally. So this is 470 square miles of the upper area watershed from the 60 and the 605 Whittier Narrows all the way back up into the mountains. It's a tremendous success story. There's more to do, and Mr. Chi Oliver, Chief City Manager of Monrovia, is going to delve into the other aspect of stormwater capture, which is cleaning it up. That's a very complicated issue. But just a bit about the bar over on 0405. Just because it's down at 60%, a little above 60%, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is the Lanada year that was 45 inches of rain. The capacity just does not exist today for the Flood Control District to capture that additional amount. So that's why that percentage drops, and you can see how high the rainfall was. But it makes you think, while we do have to feasibly, practically clean up the stormwater that falls on our city streets, we need to be thinking about how we can help the Flood Control District long term with any larger scale efforts to capture those higher flows. They're intermittent, but there's a lot of real water there. So those are all good stories about conservation. Conservation down, water use down 36%. 97% capture of stormwater, 100% increase in recycled water, a simpler depiction of the Baldwin Park Key Well here, and a 3-year forecast, all trending down. There's still a lot to do. The range in the forecast is a wet year followed by 2 average years. In the higher blue line, and in the red line is a dry year followed by 2 average years. So you can make this range more extreme, but this is a practice that the Water Master Upper District, we regularly look at this to make sure that wells go down deep enough in the right areas so that service can be maintained throughout the valley. Recycled water. Bob Harding earlier talked about a major partnership and effort between the Sanitation District and Metropolitan Water District. We're very pleased to see that. We're very supportive of that, working closely with Water Master to make sure that moves forward. And throughout Southern California, the use of recycled water, highly treated recycled water for groundwater recharge is well proven, increasingly accepted. And there's another 220,000 acre feet a year that's planned or even in progress. So we're looking at any and all opportunities to do that. We do have a project. Upper District has been pushing this forward for quite some time now. This is 9 miles of 36-inch diameter pipe, working with the Flood Control District and the Sanitation District, coming back up the San Gabriel River from the 60 and the 605, from the Sanitation District San Jose Creek wastewater treatment plant, all the way back up to the Santa Fe spreading basins there in Irwindale by Santa Fe Dam, where the water's being spread today. It's a big project for us. It doubles the asset value of recycled water assets that Upper District has on our balance sheet today. But Martha Tremley, I think, did an excellent job of summarizing for us the challenge we have when we look at making these kind of investments. So we're extremely successful with water conservation. The indoor water conservation has really taken hold, and as Brandon talked about, outdoors is where the future's at. But there is a trade-off there. While we're more reliable by that acre foot we no longer need that we've conserved, to the extent that acre foot is not flowing into the Sand District system and being returned as recycled water, we have to watch that relationship very carefully. What we don't want to get ourselves into with recycled water investments is stranding them. So we have to be very smart about where and when and how much of an investment we make in partnership with the Sanitation District. That is my last slide.
Shane Chapman, thank you so much, and thanks for sharing some success stories, because we needed a little boosting there. It was too much bad news in one day, but that's what Mother Nature has brought us the last few years. All right, another a different perspective now from a city, Monrovia, that has dealt with water issues and has come up with some of its own solutions. Oliver Chi is the city manager of the city of Monrovia, 17 years of government experience. Academically, he went to both sides of the city of LA. He got his bachelor's in poli-sci at UCLA. He has a master's in public administration from USC. He's been the manager of Monrovia since 2014 after working in a number of Southern California cities. So Oliver brings us a broad perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, Oliver Chi.
I grew up watching Patrick on TV. He's right there now. That's pretty cool. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity for us to share a little bit about stormwater. Now, our panel here talked a little bit about the overall water solution. What are we doing moving forward to try to really develop solutions to ensure we have a more reliable source of water? And stormwater could be one of the ways that we go about accomplishing that. There's a permit. I was thinking as the speakers are going through today, there's a lot of acronyms in water, but there's this new acronym we'll have to talk a little bit about, the MS4 permit, and really that's a regulatory structure that could help us really focus more on how we treat and utilize stormwater moving forward. But before we get started, our mayor, Tom Adams, likes to ask a question a lot. What's a city's most important job? And there's a tie-in to what we're doing today. There's usually two answers he gives. The first answer is, when you flush a toilet, better take the waste where it's supposed to go. That is a pretty disgusting photo. But if the sewer system isn't working, cities are going to get called. The other issue that we do get calls about is when someone turns on the tap, water better be working, right? That's just a commodity that we all need. It's a resource that we all need. As we kind of start thinking through stormwater-related issues, though, a lot of you may wonder, why are cities involved in the stormwater discussion? Why is it that we're all part of this conversation, and why is stormwater important? Cities are getting more and more involved. I see Diana Mahmood, the mayor of South Pasadena, who chairs a water committee through the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. Our council member, Gloria Crudgington, who's here also, sitting next to Larry. Spicer, another one of our council members, they both serve on that committee also. Here in California, stormwater is a really complicated issue. It's kind of esoteric. It's an issue that's hard to understand. So we're going to try to simplify it a little bit for everybody. Stormwater regs really are managed by the mothership, and the mothership is the State Water Resources Control Board. Now, mothership's got 9 little subships to govern all of California. Those subships are the regional water quality control boards, and here in the San Gabriel Valley, we're governed by the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board. Now, all the cities are involved in this discussion because of this permit called the MS4 permit. MS4 stands for the four is that there's 4 S's in this other acronym. The acronym is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. The permit really has nothing to do with sewers, though. What it has to do with is managing, capturing, treating stormwater, and how are we going to address stormwater issues moving forward. The MS4 permit is really the genesis for a lot of the things that you see every day when you're living at home. If you noticed, when I was growing up, I remember you could empty your pool and dump your pool water out onto the curb and gutter. You can't do that anymore. That's because of the MS4 permit. We sweep our streets now. Believe it or not, 20 years ago, we were really fighting with the regional water board because we didn't want to do that. That's an iteration of what's happened because of the MS4 permit. Currently, a lot of cities have implemented brand new regulations and development ordinances that require new development to retain all of the water that you capture during rain events on site. So that's new regulations that are going into effect across LA County. So all of those are initiatives that the MS4 permit's driven as we get into the stormwater discussion and this next iteration of what we're looking to do with stormwater. What's really happened since the most recent permit went into effect is this thing, another acronym called TMDLs. There's a lot of different layers to how TMDLs were established, but what TMDLs really refer to are pollutant loads. How much of a pollutant can water receive for that water still to remain in compliance with Clean Water Act standards? And so there's levels that have been established, and this most recent permit requires that all of the permittees coordinate processes to get everybody into compliance with TMDL limits. Basically, we have to clean the stormwater of all pollutants. As we start working through this new permit, though, what it created was this new process. And this new process was if you can't achieve compliance right now, and the technical reality is we can't achieve compliance right now, no city can, no permittee can, you can choose to enter and develop what's called either an enhanced watershed management plan or a watershed management program. We call them WIMPs and EWIMPs. If you create a WIMP or EWIMP, what that allows you to do is not have to be in compliance right away, but what it does and has created is throughout LA County, there have been 7 different WIMPs that have been created and 12 different EWIMPs. So there's these 19 plans that cover all the watersheds here in LA County. What those plans contemplate is for all of the permittees, all of the cities, through these plans, we've developed potential projects. And what those projects really entail is capturing through either above ground capture or subsurface infiltration, capturing, infiltrating, reusing stormwater. And it's really germane to the discussion, obviously, with the water situation that we're dealing with and the drought situation we're dealing with in the San Gabriel Valley. Here are just some pictures of what some of those facilities and projects look like. There's a lot of below ground infiltration projects, basically digging big holes, building big reservoirs so you can capture stormwater and better infiltrate it. There's above ground stormwater retention, as you see through a couple of those pictures. Green Street technologies are also real popular in all of these WIMP and EWIMP plans. Now, there are definitely challenges, though, associated with the regulatory framework and with this whole process that the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board's created. Now, the primary reason for that is, through these 19 different WIMPs and EWIMPs, what has been created is a number of different projects, and those project listings incorporate a variety of different plans. Those projects, though, are really expensive, and that's really where where we all get into a rub. For example, in LA County, throughout all of those 19 plans that have been developed, the project listing currently, they're estimated to cost $20.5 billion. For perspective, Prop 1 that we talked a little bit about earlier today, the statewide bond, that was $7.5 billion for the entire state. So in LA County alone, we've got $20.5 billion worth of projects that we're supposed to work towards implementing to clean stormwater. A little bit of a local example. In Monrovia, we're part of the Rio Hondo San Gabriel River EWIMP group. Our group put together a plan that includes 10 regional stormwater projects. It also incorporates 436 lane miles of green streets that should be created. Those projects are estimated to cost $1.4 billion. really not practicable. There's also ongoing maintenance costs we've estimated at a little over $13 million. For a little bit more perspective, we heard a speaker earlier say all politics are local. For Monrovia, our general fund operating budget on an annual basis, all of our expenditures, roughly 40 million bucks a year, just for our EWIMP plan. Our stormwater projects are estimated for Monrovia to cost $231.1 million. It's just not practicable. When you look at the time frames involved also, that's a challenge. We have till 2028, based on our current plan, to put all of these projects in place. So against that backdrop, stormwater is becoming a more high-profile issue. It's becoming an issue that there is a lot of dissension on, because obviously these aren't practicable costs. We can't afford to really do everything that's articulated, because really our EWIMP group, we don't have an extra $1.4 billion in LA County municipalities as a total. We don't have $20.5 billion or $20.5 billion laying around that we can spend on just this issue. If we're going to illustrate the issue even further, to break it down, our council member, Gloria Crudgington, was really insistent. How much is this going to cost an average homeowner? If we had to put all this in place, the additional tax bill would be over $1,300 per year to be able to fund these types of improvements. So when you factor all of that together, this current funding gap really means that it's not practical for us to be able to implement all of the plans that have been identified currently. But I think what it provides us, though, is an opportunity here to be able to more closely work with the regulatory agencies to develop a framework, a more common sense-based framework, where we can really look at stormwater as an asset and look at these projects that we have to build as potentially a way for us to capture and infiltrate and use a lot more of that stormwater. Ultimately, we do believe there's some dissension amongst cities, but generally speaking, almost all cities agree the state does have the right to regulate stormwater. It's an issue that continues to play out in court, but the regional board has in the past, and they will in the future, find jurisdictions that are out of compliance. And so against that backdrop, and also against a backdrop where the state has said, right now LA County is pretty far ahead of the rest of the state. The state has directed all of the other 9 sub-SHPs, the 9 regional water quality control boards throughout the state, that they should look at LA as the model, that every jurisdiction moving forward needs to develop these stormwater plans. And I think what that creates for us is, again, it's a reality that we have to address. We can continue to fight, or we can try to be collaborative and use this as an opportunity to really enhance our interests. And when you think about what our interests are, it's water supply, right? That there is this tremendous asset. We've heard a lot of speakers today say the flood control district of LA County does an amazing job capturing all of the stormwater in the San Gabriel Valley. And we're so reliant here in the San Gabriel Valley on groundwater. From that perspective, is there a better way where we can utilize our requirements to clean up stormwater in a way that'll boost our water supply? I think that's the link, and that's why stormwater, I think, is potentially one of the possible, again, tools for us to fix this overall water reliability issue in the San Gabriel Valley. Some facts just to consider: the National Resources Defense Council, they've published studies that indicate in LA County, every inch of rain generates 253,000 acre-feet of stormwater that potentially could be captured. In our EWIMP group, we've estimated and developed plans to capture 774 acre-feet of water per year. Those are the facilities that we've sized. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, their 2015 Urban Water Management Plan, articulated that as they move through the next couple of planning cycles over the course of the next several decades, they'd like to capture 258,000 acre-feet per year of stormwater for reuse. We talk about acre-feet, and it's hard to get perspective, so we thought we'd just do some of that quick math to show what that means. I think in the water industry, everyone knows an acre-foot is roughly 326,000 gallons of water. The NRDC study that says for every inch of rain that we get, how much stormwater does that possibly equate to? That's 82.4 billion gallons of water. In our EWIMP group, our 774 acre-feet, that equates to 252 million gallons of water. And the LADWP plan contemplates capturing potentially up to 84 billion gallons of water of stormwater every year. That's an asset that we can really use, and if we can be strategic in working with our partners at the county, working with our water agencies, can we develop better plans that are more cost effective, that allow us then to utilize that stormwater in a way that's more practicable, that's more useful for all of us. That seems to be the opportunity that we have if we can work through all of the potential regulatory issues and all of the legal issues and political issues that are associated with stormwater. And what's exciting is that there's a lot of local agencies working on management structure and governance structure. I think that's something that a lot of times we don't pay a lot of attention to, but we heard earlier from the professor, governance structures really, a lot of times determine whether or not strategies and management structures succeed or fail. Now in our EWIMP group, the Rio Hondo San Gabriel River group, we've got 8 jurisdictions, includes the cities of Arcadia, Sierra Madre, Bradbury, Monrovia, Duarte, Azusa, also the County of Los Angeles, and the LA County Flood Control Districts. You can imagine, it's a lot of different voices in the room. Each one of those cities has 5 different city council members. The county has got their own reporting structure, and it's really complicated. Getting everyone on the same page to that structure to say, here's what we're gonna do, that's really difficult. And stormwater isn't the only thing that cities in the county and the flood control district are working on. So what we've been working towards the last couple of months in our group is forming a joint powers authority to really manage stormwater issues moving forward for our EWIMP group. The way that these WIMPs and EWIMPs were developed, it really forces this, almost a sub-regional approach because it's based on watersheds. It forces different jurisdictions within watersheds to come together, and those watersheds have no natural organization to what our existing governance structures look like. And so for our group, we thought through that if we're going to be proactive and working towards a solution, one of the things we need to think through is how are we going to manage all of this stuff moving forward. And we think that coming together with a new governance structure to deal with stormwater is probably the most effective way to cut through all of the issues that confront us when you've got multiple jurisdictions trying to solve complicated problems. What that all points to, though, ultimately, if you look at the ideas that have been developed with stormwater capture, everything we're talking about today, they're all great ideas. But I think the one thing that we continue to stress is that we need to be realistic because we only have so much money. There's only so many resources that we can tap into to fund everything that we're talking about. And stormwater can't be the only public initiative that's progressed, the only public issue that's funded. And currently, with the plans that are developed, that's part of the problem. Right? In LA County, $20.5 billion worth of stormwater projects. Stormwater can't be the only thing we deal with. It's the whole suite of issues that need to be addressed. And so as we move forward, we need to figure out what we can actually afford to do in the scheme of things. And really what the state is pushing everyone towards, I think, is a model where we treat stormwater as more of a utility than we are today. And I think that's part of where the political rub and the fight and the discussions and the dialogue and the struggle will continue moving forward. There are municipalities throughout California that have implemented their own stormwater fees. LA County, you may have heard, is working on a drought resiliency fee that has a huge stormwater component. I think that's going to be, again, moving forward the next couple of years, one of those discussion points. Resource allocation is nobody wants to pay more. Nobody wants to pay more in taxes or fees. What's happening, though, with stormwater is a regulatory structure has been created where we're really going to have to think through what it is that we are going to have to pay, because I think the reality is we're going to have to do more than we're doing today. It's not likely going to be what the state wants currently. It's not going to be $20.5 billion for LA County, but it's going to be more than what we're doing currently. We need to figure out what that looks like together as we move forward. So really quickly, a final thought. Stormwater issues, the MS4 permit, they're really complicated. But again, water is such an important resource. And here for us in the San Gabriel Valley, we certainly think stormwater is part of that overall water solution. So thank you very much for the time.
Oliver, thank you so much. Yes, thinking ahead to a rainy day. It seems like it's never going to happen, but it will someday, and we need to be ready for it. We have time for a couple of questions before we take our next networking break and move on to our next session before lunch. So again, if there are any persons with questions, if you could head to the 2 sides of the room. And while we're waiting for that, I had a quick question for Oliver. Focus on stormwater recovery, but what about dry day recovery? People watering lawns, water running off the yards. There are additional issues in trying to recover that water.
Absolutely. That's actually, believe it or not, that's illegal right now. If you follow the rules of the state per the way they're written, any runoff that isn't caused by rainwater is technically not allowed. That's obviously not practicable. Cities throughout the San Gabriel Valley have adopted conservation ordinances during this drought. And in Monrovia, we have what I think is a pretty typical conservation standard. You need to have a hose bib on your hose. You need to have a bucket of water. You need to make sure you're not wasting water. And we don't have water police yet.
Right.
That's not something we want to get to. I think what we've heard throughout the day, though, is folks that have done a great job conserving. And if we can continue to do that on a macro level, that's what we need to do, is continue as a group to conserve.
Stephen, if all goes well with the Delta plan, with installing the tunnels, how far away is that? How soon could we get benefit from that?
Well, like I said earlier, it's a huge, controversial project, and so our goal right now is for the state to make a decision on the planning step. And once that happens, we'll have to see what type of litigation will occur. But it's estimated to be about a 12 to 15-year construction period. So let's say the plans are approved, the permits, state board, a water rights decision, all in by 2018. If it started in 2018 with groundbreaking, then about 12 to 15 years beyond that, the project would be operational. But in the meantime, a lot of effort on maintaining the existing system and making sure that we do what we can to prepare for earthquakes if they occur in the Delta because of those fragile levees.
Right.
And so all of that is important as well.
Shane, we talked a lot about recycling this morning, and I guess at this point we're trying to grab the low-hanging fruit. How much further can we push that, and how big ultimately a chunk of the water we want to put into the ground for the San Gabriel Valley could we get through the recycling?
Well, the Carson project that Metropolitan Water District and the Sanitation District are partnering on it's a massive project. It's as large as the project that's been quite successful in Orange County, if not a little bit larger. The short answer to the question is, on average, we need 40, 50,000 acre feet a year to hedge the risk of the local hydrology. You could do potentially all of that with the Carson project.
So maybe we can make it until the Fix-It project is done. Not that we have a choice, we have to make it.
We have a choice. We're going to make it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for our panelists.
Question? We have a question.
Oh, we do. I was looking over. I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hi. First, a statement. Oliver did an outstanding job of describing the challenges being faced by municipalities. But if you took anything away from his presentation, I hope it's the understanding that cities do recognize we have Clean Water Act responsibilities, but in order to effectively address those responsibilities, we need to utilize existing infrastructure, such as that maintained by LA County Flood Control District, so that we can convey stormwater where it can be captured on a macro rather than on a micro basis. It's the micro capture that really drives up the costs. But I also have a question for Steve, and that is, I was very heartened to see the State Water Board finally pay attention to the uses, the diversions of some of the tributaries that feed the Bay Delta, and the diversions through the McCollumee Aqueduct and the Hetch Hetchy Aqueduct. And I'm wondering, while I think it's really high time that the Bay Area's urban use of water is examined, I'm wondering whether or not you anticipate that that may delay some of the decisions that we're hopeful will be coming to resolve the water fix. Is this going to just open up further complex issues that might delay the state acting on issuing the permits that are necessary for the water fix to go forward?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. I don't think it has to. I don't think it should. The State Water Board has an ongoing responsibility to review standards in the Delta, for example, every 3 years, make a determination of whether changes are necessary. And they make modifications along the way. With the Cal Water Fix project, they're narrowly focused on the new intakes and what kind of situations that brings about, whether there's impacts to other water right holders, whether there's impacts to fish and wildlife. So that is proceeding right now. That process is underway. And at the same time, they are in the middle of reviewing the standards for the Delta overall. And when they get to a point where they establish what those objectives are, they would look at who should meet those. And I don't believe it should have to delay, because that's an ongoing responsibility that they have nonetheless.
Thank you for your question, and thank you to our panelists. So we're going to take a brief break, then we're going to delve deeper into conservation, and when we return in a few minutes, I'll introduce you to your new moderator. So let's make this a 3-minute break, and we'll see you back here in 3. Thank you so much.